everything in this whole process, everything you say is in the form of a question. Everything you say is in the form of a question. So the whole life of the consequence is all, by the way, these questions are laced with ideas. For example, had you thought about doing this next time? Next time, what would happen if you had done that, or whatever? Oh, you're not quiet at this point, but you're always in the form of a question. There is simply no confrontation. You should have done that, next time you better do that, or else it's, you know, all those lectures that we get into, the parade of horribles that we go through, so that they will respond. Okay. Dreiker's, 1957. One of his strategies was when you felt that a student was in a power struggle with you, but you really didn't know whether it was a tension, whether it was power, whether it was revenge. He says what you do with a student is you sit down with the student and you never confront the student with, hey, cut out your power struggle, you know, the lecture that goes with it. You always ask a student, could it be that you want to be boss? And if it was a power struggle a student had in mind, not from their conscious, but from their collective subconscious, that they would come up, they would give you what you would call this silly little smile. That, remember when you're caught, you get this little, they call it a recognition reflex, that the student recognized all of a sudden that they were in a power struggle. But he says never confront students. What you want to do is to ask. And if you're wrong, maybe they didn't want to be boss, maybe it was something else and such. But it doesn't mean that you had done anything to disrespect them. But if you put it in the form of a question, then they begin doing the thinking. And if you want kids to learn responsibility, they have to be doing thinking. And this is what questions do. Now, some students aren't even going to respond. They're going to have nothing to say. So your response, I see you'd rather not talk about this now. Would after school be better? The question, the operative words is there, we're going to talk about this. So all the way through this process, as you're developing the question, that student feels that teacher's on my side. You know, they're really working at keeping me here in school. They really like me, you know, to help put the stuff back together again. They're interested in what about next time, you know, what kinds of things might you do so you avoid these kinds of things. You're going to, all the language, all the behavior is going to be such that I'm your professional here, and this is my responsibility to help you and certainly keep you in school. So as much of the language, your behaviors model is designed for obedience, and if you don't obey, the language then pushes you out of school. It pushes you away, it dispirits you, it does all of these kinds of things. What I'm suggesting is a language that a professional would use. Someone to keep you basically in school, provide a community, use strategies to build community and to keep the student in as opposed to pushing kids out. So hopefully this is a model to build community, to keep students within the community, and not simply to push them out. Now, any questions now on consequences?
I just have to ask. I have a hard time when they get physically fighting, and I always seem to not know, because you can see how things escalated, and if they, so how would let's say you had one student, attack another student, and the other one fought back, and then by the time you come out from lunch and it's all up and off, there's this big thing. Yeah. Well, what would you recommend in that kind of situation? It's obviously health and safety.
Right. Oh yeah. They shouldn't be fighting. But what would the consequences be?
Yeah, it's like how would that be handled?
Okay, almost every school in America will have those students suspended for fighting automatically.
Right.
Okay. And most cases, one student didn't want to fight. In some cases, both didn't want to fight. And yet that you have the students out of school now for fighting. So this is a general rule that it's an automatic suspension.
Okay.
For the, But I learned in working in the Chicago area with their schools, is that the safest place to fight for kids was where? At school. That's their safest. You could get killed out of school. But if you fought at school, you had somebody there to break it up. Or if it was the rites of passage fight, with the bully or whatever, that everyone could see that and that that you could. So school is the best place for kids to fight. Now, we're an organization that runs the best place to fight for kids. And what do? We ban them from school for fighting, and if it's not here, it's unsafe. On the other hand, we can't say, okay, everybody that wants to fight, go to the flagpole at noon, and so we can't look like we're advancing fighting as a way of resolving issues. So don't you think we're caught in a box? We're really caught in a box when it comes to something like fighting. So what I recommend is that instead of taking the criminal justice model to it, we'll use suspensions as a deterrent for people that want to fight. Will say, oh, I don't think I'll fight, I don't want to be suspended. Kids usually aren't thinking like that. No, that's what I mean. So if we're educators and know this, why would we use the criminal justice model when it comes to fighting? I'm looking for educational strategies. And a lot of schools, especially middle school and high school, are dealing with peer mediation as a way. So the principal, working the principals, two kids fighting, will say, okay, we need to work this through, and they might bring peer mediation and everything. But you could bring strategies like I've just talked about, and you say, okay, what happened? Kid says up, the other kid sits down. And you say, what do we need to do now? How can we get you back together again? When it comes, you're looking for obviously a handshake or something. In elementary, a lot of teachers, some will have this bench thing where they sit on benches and they move closer and closer as they resolve issues. So there's all kinds of strategies for doing this. I'm sure you have employed a lot here. But I'm looking for those strategies like that, where discourse, and a lot of times another person, the teacher, principal, that could sit down with them and say, okay, and get them talking enough so that they can resolve their differences and get to the handshake and get back to class. Now, your biggest problem is, and that is nothing happened to them. So you get the criminal justice people that want the pound of flesh. They want the retribution. They want a punishment to show that punishing is bad. As you know, you don't get elected to public office unless you are tough on crime, unless you're going to build more prisons. You know that. And it tends to reflect in the schools that a lot of some of the teachers and parents want you to be so tough that that's the only way they think. But I'm going to argue, say, I'm an educator here with this kind of thing, and I'm going to use educational strategies first, see if I can help resolve this problem, without looking to punishing strategies, push. The moment they're out of school for a few days, you know how it is, teachers, when they come back to get them caught up and all this, plus them getting caught up, plus a lot of the kids fighting shouldn't miss any school. In fact, a lot of them are out of school now, they come back, then they fight, and then they're out again. So, the school time that they lose for that doesn't make sense educationally. So nothing makes sense educationally about pushing them out, unless they're dangerous. Now, if they're dangerous, or there's drugs involved or something like that, then obviously you're dealing with that. But a lot of kids fighting just growing up as they approach adolescence and all this sort of thing, it's a tremendous time for these kids, in just adjusting to this. And then to use punishment or all of this as a consequence doesn't make sense to me. So I would come to educational strategies. Now when parents come in and say, well, why weren't they kicked out of school? This other kid started the fight, and my son, daughter, with this, they should have been, kicked out of school and so for this. And that's where you have to sound like an educator. That my job is to keep all students in school unless they're dangerous, and to resolve issues. And when we talk, they seem to resolve the issue. They shook hands and all of this, and they're both back in the classroom, and they're both now have an equal educational opportunity to succeed. It's those things, but I would go to those basic principles as I would argue their equal educational opportunity, and all. But your biggest problem many times will be parents that don't understand you're not using punishment or expounding that. Yeah.
And so what you say, if that parent comes back with, well, that child is dangerous, they hit my child.
That's right. That's right. Well, but then that's what you look into. And it may be a disability or something like that you need to, but that's what I would use that process. And they may be dangerous. And I would deal with a dangerous student with it. Again, I don't have answers. I have ideas as how I would respond to this. And when it comes to consequences, my idea is the relationship itself as a way to resolve it. But once you're out of that relationship and become the enemy, we really don't have a chance to help that student in this sort of thing. We have to take enemy-type things, which is your adversarial stuff that you do, and that is usually push the student out. So what I'm trying to do, which is really hard, I can't do it all the time with this, is to stay in that professional mindset. The kid that calls you the B word, the F word, what we use initials now for to speak, but the words like that, if you look at it as a cry for help instead of as an attack on your personality or person, I think it really helps to look at that and to finish the kids, all this language against you says, looks like you're having a bad day. Would you like to talk about it or something like that? What a response to a kid that's all, and it could be something that happened at home or something like that, and you happen to be the next one or the authority figure they're dealing with at another venue. I mean, it's exciting to think professionally. And when I do, I'm good. And I know I'm good. But when I don't, I'm not that good. I just am not that helpful. And I just know it walking home from school. I just know it. It could have been better. But it's a matter of handling the ego thing. That's, as you know, that's the thing that just gets in the way of so many relationships. And so it's the same way with the professional. So I try to talk about in the first part of the book is get into that professional self, and just see yourself as that professional and look at everything that happens and as manifestations of kids that are having problems or angry or whatever, instead of taking it personally. Because once you get out of that professional self, it's scary what happened, what we're like, what I've been like, when I've done that.
Let me rephrase it, what you're trying to say. I think starting with teachers have no rights in the classroom. We have responsibilities. The students are the ones with the rights. Because you see, rights flow to your government. The rights only protect you from your government. And a teacher in a public school classroom is the only government in the classroom, and the rest are students. So your rights would flow to your principal, to your superintendent, to your school board, and so forth. But you have responsibilities, and to carry out your responsibilities, you use these compelling state interests. The rights are the students on this side, and you have the responsibilities to carry out these. So in order to carry out your responsibilities, you're going to need a classroom free of disruption. So all I would suggest is, if you just don't have to say, I have rights in the classroom, but to carry out my responsibilities, we're going to need a classroom where it's free from serious disruption.
Okay, all right. You don't have rights, teachers don't have a whole lot of rights in a lot of ways, but if you don't have rights as an individual and a student is verbally or physically abusive, of course, so that falls on that they're violating. But if I don't have any rights, then what are they doing? Are they violating?
You have responsibilities.
Right, but if I might have responsibilities, but if you're saying I don't have any rights and somebody talks back to me or is...
They don't have a right, in a sense, to talk back to the government.
Okay.
You're the government in the classroom. That's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to give you the semantics for that. You're the government in the classroom. And we don't have the right in our government of freedom of speech either. When we advocate the violent overthrow of our government, it's called treason. And that could land us in a lot of trouble. So, I mean, there are rules that protect us. from that too. But if you look at yourself as government in the classroom and the students as the citizens, then you have basically the legal model that plays out.
So I'm the advocate because I'm the government, I would be.
You're the leader. You're the governmental leader within the classroom. So what we advance is what is called a leadership role that you would play. The leadership of letting them know their responsibility. See, you're part of everybody else in the group. Because they may be talking back to you or something of this nature. And it is affecting that whole classroom. And they can't do that when it causes a serious disruption of the environment. See, I'm only trying to, what you said is right. I'm just trying to give you the language now. Because teachers keep saying, I have rights in the classroom. And legally you don't, because your rights flow to the government. And if you're the only government in the classroom, that doesn't make sense.
What takes the time is the lectures we give. If I wanted to sum up what I would do, always ask questions. When somebody is screwed up, everything should be in question first. Everything. Now these questions can be laced with ideas. Like, what do you think you could do next time? Silence. Well, have you thought about doing this? What would happen if you would do this next time? It's this kind of thing. This is where you're respecting their intelligence, their ability to think. But the moment you start lecturing, you're creating that obedience, codependent kind of a thing. But always ask questions.